Welcome to week 6 of Bible Day Live, my Bible habit, my Bible hobby, and I'm excited to be here with you to share the things I've been up to this week in the Word. Okay, so as usual, if you'd like the schedule that we're following, which is a chronological Bible, one of many chronological Bibles or chronological reading plans as it goes. And I'm making it a habit a part of what I'm doing to look at the different reading plans that are chronological. And this week we were in Exodus 23 through 40 and Leviticus 1 through 5. And we're going to get this party started. And like I was saying about the actual reading plans for chronological Bibles, there are many different ones. And the ones that I am using is actually, let me check and make sure that we have audio. Let me check and make sure. Okay, yeah, we're good. They're different plans. So this particular plan that I'm using, I'm comparing it with other ones, and man, it's fascinating to look at the differences. So we'll be talking about that a little later in the show up. I don't call this a show, I call it a show up because I am showing up for the word. I'm showing up for myself to gain wisdom from the word, and that's why it's a show up. So I appreciate each and every one of you being here today. So we're going to start with, of course, the presentation. And so I'm going to just go ahead and get this going here and share this window. Okay, so you now should be able to see that on your screen. And of course, all week we are looking for gems, looking for gems, looking for gems in the word. This is our timeline, and where we are still in this timeline is let me get this set just right so I can point to this on the screen. We're still here in this area of the big picture timeline. So we've been through creation, the fall, the flood, the call of Abraham from Mesopotamia over to the land of Canaan. Now we've gone through Exodus. We've started in Exodus, and this whole week we're finishing Exodus. Last week they actually left Israel, and now they actually left Egypt, and now they are in the wilderness. So they begin that journey. This is the messianic genealogy that we are flowing through. And as of right now, we're here. So all of these people have been born and lived in our story, in our chronological story, and we're up to here as far as the messianic line is concerned. This week we were in Exodus 23 through 40. That was the first portion of the soundtrack. And let's make sure here that and the things that are highlighted right here are the things that we will be looking at in a little more detail. I'm going to tell you, I am just going to let me pull myself up here for a minute. I'm going to tell you, it is really and truly hard to not do deep dives into every one of the topics that we have on the week. But keeping myself on a schedule, I don't have time to do that and also get something produced. So this has been really, really good for me to just keep moving through without just reading it and not doing anything with the material, but also capturing those things that I look into further as far as doing deeper research. Okay. So this week we're going to look at the Sabbath. Let me bring the screen share back. We're going to look at the Sabbath and the year of rest. We're going to look at the three annual feasts, the Sabbath as a sign. And of course, in Exodus 23, it is laws of justice, Sabbath, and the covenant. 24 talks about the covenant is confirmed. The people accepted the covenant. Moses and the elders see God. Moses ascends to Mount Sinai. Exodus 25. This is when Moses was given. This is when Moses was given the specifications to build the tabernacle. Not that it is built yet, but these are the precise instructions for building it. And I'm going to tell you one of the things that is just so fascinating is the actual measurements, the type of wood, the acacia wood. This is overlaid by gold. This is hammered from pure gold, or this is measured in this way. These are the rings that it takes. The rings should be silver. This is the types of curtains. This is the the rings that go in the curtains. How many of rings go in the curtain? How the curtains are attached together? What the material of the curtains are made out of? Measurements for every piece in there. It is just so precise. And what that tells me is, for my life right now, is that God is precise. The things that he deems as holy and consecrated to him are, he's serious about that. I don't get to say, well, I think the showbread needs to be on the left hand side because, feng shui says, or whatever decorating principle says, this is the way that God likes it, and this is the way it needs to be done. End. Total end of story. So I wanted to make sure I thought about that in my life today. So the altar, the courtyard, the measurements of the courtyard, the oil for the lamp, the olive oil for the lamps, even the priest's garments, how his breastplate would be made, the gems that go in the breastplate, the ordination of the priest, the consecration of them, the instructions for more instructions for the sanctuary, the census offering right there, the anointing oil and incense. And 31, these two men were chosen for the work of God. They were skilled in every craft. Can you imagine being skilled in every craft? That's why they were chosen. They were masters. The golden calf, they hadn't even, the children of Israel hadn't been out of um, Egypt very long, something like a month, I think. I'd have to look at the timeline. But basically Moses had been up on that mountain too long, and somebody says, "Hey Aaron, we don't know what happened to this Moses fella. We we want to do something different." So Aaron, bless him, he tells everybody to take off their earrings and take off their their jewelry and their gold and give it to him. And when Moses asked him about it, he was like, "Hey man, I just threw the gold in the fire and this calf came out." Like, really? It just popped out. Like, that's your best answer. So I wasn't really feeling Aaron about them, because he let the people just get totally out of control. Moses lost it, broke the tablets. He had to go back up there another 40 days to get more tablets. God wrote those tablets with his own fingers. The Bible says that the commandments were written with the finger of God, and Moses completely lost it and just broke them. And then after that we find this. Let's go back to the screen share. After that, Moses calls out to the Lord on behalf of these people and say, Lord, I really know that they kind of messed up. Okay, they messed up like big time. But can you forgive them? And if not, you can erase my name. I don't know if I love anybody that much to give up my salvation for them. But one thing we can say about Moses is he was a man that loved the Hebrew people. He was raised as Pharaoh's adopted son, or I guess that would be grandson. But he chose the plight of the Hebrew people. He chose to be with them instead of living in that luxury. Of course, he was very educated. He had to have been to grow up in that environment. So when he came down and he saw what they had done with the golden calf, with Aaron being the one in charge down there, they came to him, to Aaron. He could have stopped it right there, but no, he throws the gold in the fire and the calf came out. And then they had the nerve to say that this is the God that brought us out of Egypt. What is the first commandment? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I'm a jealous God. And the very thing that they do is make a golden image. So Moses was really upset about that. Then God plagues the people for that. And then Moses says, okay, who's on the Lord's side? And the tribe of Levi, the Levites, came forward. And he sent them off and said, since you're on the Lord's side, you need to go kill foes and consecrate yourselves to the Lord. So they killed like 3,000 people that day. So that is coming up. So after that happened, we get Moses being shown in this tent of meeting, which is an interesting thing because the tent of meeting was actually outside of the camp. It's actually outside of the camp, this tent of meeting. Now, the tent of meeting is not the tabernacle, because the tabernacle hasn't been built yet. This is the tent of meeting that Moses built outside of the camp. And when he would go to that tent to meet and talk with God, a pillar of cloud would come and sit in front of the tent. And Moses and Aaron would talk Moses and God, the Father, would sit and talk like friends, face to face. And when Moses would go in there, the people would actually stand in their tents looking. And when they would see the pillar of cloud standing in the tent front, they would bow down and worship. They knew that was the presence of the Lord. So that being outside the camp, because at that point, the people were separated from God because of all that calf stuff. They were separated, but Moses wasn't separated. And so this tent was the tent of meeting, was his way to communicate with God and show the people that I'm still in communion and you should get yourselves together so you can be in communion too. So that was Exodus 33, and we're going to go over here to be able to go to the next slide here. Now, I'm doing this presentation. Inside of Canva, Canva. And I like it so far, but I keep every single week, I keep forgetting to install. There's a thing that you can install to do the remote clicking of the, you can do the remote clicking. I'm gonna see, will it let me? Anyway, I won't do that now, but I need to remember. What's this on my? I need to remember to set that up because that would be so helpful. So then I'm not hunting around on the screen to find my clicker. So now this is the second page of headings. I call these headings pericope. Pericope is another word for the headings in the Bible. So Exodus 34 is the renewal of the covenant. This is when Moses went back up and stayed up there another 40 days and got some more tablets. And when he came back, his face was glowing because he had been in the presence of the Lord. And the people were like, what in the world? Moses looking very, very different. And it like set them back. So he covered his face so they wouldn't see that and be thrown off by that. The construction of the tabernacle starts in 36. It's constructed. This was so nice to hear for a change. The people gave more than enough. More than enough. When have we ever gone to church and said, okay, y'all, we don't need any more stuff because we have more than enough? Then the tabernacle began, the actual building of it, and here are in 37 it explains stuff, and 39 is still making, and then in Exodus 40 right here the tabernacle is set up and God's glory fills the temple. And that is exactly how they know that this thing that they'd put together from these exact specifications, that's how they know that it has been accepted. God's glory fills the temple. It was completed, the tabernacle was completed on the first day of the first month of the second year leaving Egypt. So that was about 11 months after the Exodus, after they crossed over the Red Sea or something like that. It was about a year afterwards that they finished building the tabernacle. So then the rest of the soundtrack was Leviticus 1 through 5, and that was setting up the burnt offering, grain offerings, the different peace offerings, and the sin offering. So different laws, requirements that was giving there. So let's go into the things that I had a chance to actually look into further. The sabbatical year. The sabbatical year is mentioned. I didn't put the reference here. Let me see. Did I put it over here? The sabbatical year. The sabbatical year was mentioned in Exodus 23. And so I thought that was something interesting to look into. And I found out that to this day, people in Jerusalem, religious Jews, some of them, actually observe the sabbatical year. And the sabbatical year is you plant and harvest for 6 years. And on the seventh year, the land rests. And thinking about the logistics, how intentional you have to be to know that, okay, I've got 6 years and to plant and harvest. And on the seventh year, I have to be more about faith because I can't eat from the land that year. The land has to rest. The animals can eat from the land that year, and poor people and animals and different, wild animals can, but not the actual farmer. And so this picture over here is a guy that I imagine growing onions in Israel, and on one of those years that's not a sabbatical year. So every 7 years, the land itself, not just every 7 days rest for a person, but every 7 years, the actual land rest. Almost like Joseph, you remember when Joseph told Pharaoh about his dream that there would be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine? Them, the children of Israel, being able to keep this commandment to have the sabbatical year for the land, that was their template for that. They knew how to do those things. It wasn't like something that was never heard of before. And so I actually read an article about a modern day farmer in Israel that observes the sabbatical year. Now, all religious Jews do not observe the sabbatical year. And now we have to remember that all Jews are not religious. The only thing you have to do to be a Christian is to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and he was born and he died according to the scriptures and he rose again. I have a comment. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, great. Good morning. So the only thing you have to do to be a Christian is to be is to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and he rose and he was born again and he rose again. But to be a Jew, you have to be born into the Jewish family that comes from those 12 sons of Jacob that was renamed Israel. You do not have to observe Judaism to be a Jew. So there are Jews that are Jews because they're born in the family, and then there are Jews that actually practice Judaism, right? So that was a very interesting article about this modern day Israel farmer that practices the sabbatical year. Now, the last sabbatical year was in 2021, and the next one is in 2028 to 2029, and that is deemed to be the next year of faith. The year following, and how this is this 5789. This is the Jewish calendar. The year and how they count it is the year following the destruction of the second temple is 3,829 from creation, which was 69 to 70 AD. Like 70 AD is when the second temple fell, and that was the first year of the 7 year sabbatical cycle. And this number right here keeps counting from there. We do know that the term sabbatical is used in workplaces where you get some time off to, go travel, or a sabbatical you take before you go to college, or a professor that takes a sabbatical to do research and other things like that. Now, the thing that I wanted to notice here about parallel passages is in our soundtrack for this week is Exodus 23 through 10. But some of the same things, time periods, is also in Leviticus 25, 1 through 7, and Deuteronomy 15 through 6. Sometimes it is the details repeated, sometimes it is giving you more details. A parallel passage can point you to a particular time, or it can allude to something that applies to all time but ties back to the actual parallel passage. So in reference Bibles, you see those references to those scriptures, and it's always good if you can follow those because you're sure to learn something. But the only thing about it is sometimes, it can take a lot of time to do those things. But in this soundtrack for this week, I followed these particular three, which was Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, because they are so very similar. But when you look at the time frame from where those three books were written, it is different time frames. And so, like they're looking back, okay? They're looking back to when the tabernacle was set up, um, or they're looking forward, referencing that time. So that's why those parallel passages can make a big difference. And we will look at some of those and show you something very interesting that I found. Okay, fallow. Fallow is a concept that is used today in farming, and it really has to do with the nutrient density of the soil. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but I attended nutrition school to be a certified health coach for almost 2 years from one institution, and then another year under a natural path um, doctor, a naturopathic doctor, because I really wanted to understand what was happening to me at that time from a Western culture perspective, and also from a naturopathic perspective, and never the two shall meet. The stuff that the regular doctor was telling me was just completely different from the kinds of things that the naturopath doctor was telling me. So it was just very interesting to try and fit all of those things together. But saying all that to say that I really understood this concept of letting the land rest and rotating crops and things like that, because it really speaks to how dense the nutrients are in the food. You can't keep taking and taking and taking from the soil and never let it rest and replenish and recreate the biology, or it's not biology, the ecosystems that make that land grow. You do actually need to let the land rest. So, fallow is a farming technique in which land is left without sowing for one or more cycles to allow the land to recover and store organic matter while retaining moisture and disrupting pest life cycles and soil borne pathogens by temporarily removing their hosts. So that is done to this day. To this day, it is a farming technique. And my ancestors were absolutely farmers. The other thing I got into a little bit was the pilgrimage feasts. These were times, 3 times a year, that all the males were to appear before the Lord. Now, it is actually, this pilgrimage feast is mentioned in our soundtrack for this week. But remember, for this, where we are right now in time, they've just come out of Egypt. They've just been out just 1 year, just now setting up the tabernacle. So there is no temple for them to appear to. So this appearing is actually in the wilderness. If they're going to keep the feast of unleavened bread, that is also called Passover, that is just celebrating when the Lord passed over the people of Israel that night when the firstborn of Egypt was killed. And that is a feast for 7 days. The Feast of Harvest is another one, and the Feast of Ingathering, that is called Tabernacles. Also, it's called Tabernacles and some other names. We'll look at those. And that is 7 days plus an eighth day called the Convocation. So here are some of the other names for Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. Those are the names that I like. I like Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. But Passover is also called the feast, the Paschal feast or the Festival of Spring. Pentecost is also known as Shavuot. It can be spelled this way or this way. It's also called the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Harvest, the Day of First Fruits, and the Festival of Weeks. And the Tabernacles is also called Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, Feast of course, Feast of Tabernacles, and I've got this one twice. So I need to fix that. And the Feast of Ingathering. And I think I need to, let's go back one slide. The Feast of Harvest. This one right here. Let's see if we added that to our list on the second one. Feast of Harvest, Feast of Weeks. Yeah, we got it here. Feast of Harvest. So they're known as many different names, but I refer to them. You always have to have a standard for how you're gonna reference things. And the standard that I really like referencing things is chronology. First, I want to know when did it happen. Then I want to know what happened. And these are the names I'm going to use: Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. Okay. And these are the months. Remember when it said that they came out of Egypt in the month of Abib. And then after there was exile, which is going further down on our calendar, our timeline, it's called Nisan. The name of the month was changed from Abib to Nisan, and these are the other names of the months. This is another way of looking at ooh, this is another way of looking at the months, and I've got something in my eye. Okay. So this is Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. And since these months over here, all of these months, they are different than our months, but you can map them on our calendar. So that means Pentecost happens around here, April, so, which is in our Easter and First Friday and all of those celebrations. And then Pentecost is here, around here, and Pentecost is 50 days after, or about 50 days after Passover. Pentecost is about 50 days after Passover. Then the Tabernacles. This is the other major feast. Major meaning that all the males were to appear before the Lord. That means they had to take a road trip. And this here is just marking to where we are today in on the Jewish calendar. So we are in the month of Shivat right here on the Jewish calendar. The first Jewish month mentioned in the Bible is Abib, also spelled Aviv. That's right here. It is referenced in Exodus 13:4. This day came ye out in the month of Abib. So that was God saying that you were brought out of Egypt in the month of Abib. Abib was the name of the first month of the Hebrew calendar before the Babylonian exile. After the exile, it became known as Nisan, and we'll see that in Nehemiah and in Esther. Now, a lot of things in the Bible relate to harvest and farming and that whole cycle of sowing and reaping. So the spring harvest is around March, June, and barley is harvested first. And then about a month later, it's the wheat harvest that begins around Shavuot. Of course, we're calling that Pentecost. So Shavuot is the Hebrew word for Pentecost. Of course, Pentecost is the name that is used in the New Testament, and so that's what I'm more familiar with. The summer harvest, that is the grapes, the figs, the olives, and summer fruits that are ripened throughout July and September. So when you think about that and you think about some of the stuff that Jesus did, the first thing I think about is him turning water into wine, and how some people say there's no way. Anyway, the timing of Christmas, I just don't believe Jesus was born in December. I just don't believe that. Anyway, the fall, I think it was more like this time of year, because it was they had to travel. Mary and Joseph had to travel to get to go to the census to be counted. And I just don't think they were doing that in the winter. I don't think they would require them to do that in the winter. But anyway, the fall harvest is olives harvested from September to November, and the final harvest of fruits and late crops celebrated during the Feast of Tabernacles. So these are some good things to keep in mind when you see those references about harvest. Okay, Sabbath as a sign. We're just going back to our soundtrack here. This is the thing that I was interested next in looking into. And this Exodus 31:13 is a verse that I am calling out here. Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily, my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. I am the Lord that separates you. So now we know that the Sabbaths that we're talking about here is not just the Sabbaths on the weekly, it is the Sabbath for the land as well, every 7 years. Now we'll talk about the tabernacle was set up. Now I did this to try and show how those parallel passages talk about the same events, but they're in totally different books, in totally different areas, and you have to have a frame of reference to be able to go back and put the pieces together. Okay, so let's look first at this Exodus 40 and 2. That's in our soundtrack for this week. It says that the tabernacle was set up on the first day of the first month. Then it was consecrated 8 days after that. 8 days after it was set up, it was consecrated. But look at this. This is in Exodus where it tells us this part, but it's in Leviticus 9 and 1 where it tells us this part. Then we look at the offerings of the dedication. This is when each tribe leader came and gave their offerings to dedicate to the dedication of the temple. The princes right here, and the princes offered for dedicating of the altar of the in the day that it was anointed. So they came on this day to say that we're going to give our offerings before the altar. So 8 days later, the princes offered to give their gifts. But look at where this is. This is Numbers 7 and 10. Okay, so that tells us even when we do those references, when we look up those parallel passages, those passages can be giving us more details about the actual time period that we're in right now. Okay, so then down here in number 7 is when Moses said, okay, the Lord told Moses that each prince was to present each prince was to present their offering for the dedicate of the altar on his day. So, and that sounds like each one of them did it on a separate day. And the offering, the first day, was Nashon, the son of Amminadab of the tribe of Judah. Wait a minute, Judah? Judah is not the firstborn. The firstborn was Reuben. I mean, you would just think that the firstborn would be the one that gave the actual, offering first. He was the oldest. But we will see throughout the Bible when all of the tribes are listed for something, for this, that, or the other thing, we'll be reminded to look at the order that the tribes are listed. Because there could be some significance about that order. Could be some significance there. So in this particular case, we have the order that they did their offerings. It was Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. But the order that they were actually born from their moms and their dad, Jacob, was Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Of course, Joseph was the one who went to Egypt, who was sold by his brothers to the slaves, masters, to the slave traders, and was sold to Potiphar. And he had these two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, in Egypt. Manasseh was firstborn. But as we go along, we learn surely that Ephraim is mentioned a lot of times first and given precedence over Manasseh. So this is one of those times right there. So you still have 12 though. You still have 12 tribes, 12 leaders of the tribes presenting their dedication, their offerings for the dedication, and you had 12 sons of Israel. Well, we know Joseph wasn't on this list. A representative from Joseph, the tribe Joseph, wasn't on this list, but his two sons were because Jacob adopted these two boys. And we know the Levites were not on this list because you remember when Moses came down the from the mountain and they had made the calf and he was upset and he said, "Who was on the Lord's side?" And it was the Levites that stood up and said, "We're on the Lord's side." And Moses told them to go kill their family and all of that stuff. And so that day, the Levites became consecrated to the Lord. So all of the things that all of the other tribes had to do, even being given land later on that we'll see, the Levites were not included in that. They wouldn't be included because their inheritance is God Himself. And they were consecrated to God. And because Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons, were added into this list of 12 tribes, we still get 12 offerings and we still have 12 sons born to Jacob, original sons. Okay, now we're not even in Numbers, but this is just to show that those parallel scriptures can show us even more detail about the actual time period that we're looking at. And the time period we're looking at is they've come out of Egypt, they have set up the tabernacle, and this scripture in Numbers tells us a little more details. And the Lord spake to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of the congregation. So he was actually in the tabernacle that they'd finished building, right? And this was the first day of the second month in the second year. So that was a month later. A month after the dedication, Moses was given this directive to count the people, to do a census, to do a census. Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their poles. And these poles is like the family symbol, their poles. Like where it's kind of like street signs, like in the desert where you would know that, oh, that's my family's tribe over there, because they all had their different symbols. Okay, take this numbering from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth in war in Israel, thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. And this was the second month of the second year, a month after it was set up. So, looking at the actual references when you can really give you more details to put that picture together. Now, this is a card that I created for myself that I am selling for, I think it's $3.69. So I can do Cash App for that. that I to have this in your Bible. It is a physical card to put in your Bible. It's kind of a hint card to just remember the the genealogy. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. These are the 12 boys and where they were born. So that is what I have today. I'm going to see. Yes, it definitely does, Kathleen. It does enrich the soil. Thank you for that. So that is what I have for you today. We are this little Bible habit that I have right here, that is absolutely part of my life project. And I have some exciting things that I am doing with some personal note taking apps that helps me lay out my project in a visual way. I'm a very visual learner, very visual person. It helps me lay it out so I can see what I'm doing. This is the life project. We have the word, the person, and the money. What are we doing as it relates to the word? Well, we're doing this live stream. The Bible Day live stream is what I'm doing to go with the word part of my life project. For my person, the things that what am I doing for my person, my actual being, my staying, keeping my body healthy, keeping my mind healthy, keeping relationships healthy? What am I doing on that? So I want to see all of those things visually. And of course, what are we doing for the money? We all have to do something to make the money, something to get the money. Somebody has to give it to us. It has to come from somewhere. So, what is our plan to actually get money to sustain ourselves? So, the word, the person, and the money of the life project. So, with that being said, I pray that the Lord will watch between me and thee while we are absent one from another. I look forward to seeing you next week, God willing. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a good day. Oh, I was just checking to see if I had any more comments. I don't. So bye now.